At my husband's funeral, beside the grave, I received a text message. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It said, "I'm not in the coffin, I'm alive. Don't trust the children. They're watching you." I looked up and saw my son staring at me with a smile I'd never seen before. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. Because this story doesn't start at the funeral. It doesn't even start 6 months ago when everything began to fall apart. This story really starts 38 years ago when I married the love of my life, Robert James Patterson, and we promised each other that we'd face everything together, no matter what came our way. We just never imagined that what came our way would be our own children. My name is Margaret Ann Patterson, though Robert always called me Maggie. I'm 61 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was and what my life meant. I was a wife, a mother, a grandmother. I'd spent 38 years building a life with a man who made me laugh every single day. We weren't perfect. We had our fights, our struggles, our moments where we wondered if we'd make it, but we always did. We always found our way back to each other. Robert was 63 when he supposedly died. We met when I was 23, and he was 25. I was working as a secretary at an engineering firm, and he was the new junior engineer who kept finding excuses to come to my desk. He'd ask me where the supply closet was even though he'd already asked me 3 times that week. He'd need help with the copier even though I'd seen him use it perfectly fine the day before. Finally, after 2 weeks of this, I said, "You know, if you want to ask me out, you could just ask me out instead of pretending you don't know how to work basic office equipment." His face turned bright red. He stammered something about professional boundaries and not wanting to make me uncomfortable. Then he took a deep breath and said, "Would you like to have dinner with me this Friday?" I said yes. That Friday dinner turned into Saturday breakfast. Saturday breakfast turned into Sunday at the park. Before we knew it, we were inseparable. We got married 8 months later in a small ceremony with just our families and closest friends. My mother said we were rushing into things, that we barely knew each other, but I knew Robert. I knew him in a way I'd never known anyone before or since. I knew the way he hummed when he was concentrating on something difficult. I knew how he took his coffee, black with just a tiny bit of sugar. I knew that he cried during sad movies, but would pretend he had allergies. I knew that he was kind and honest and loyal to his core. We had our first child, Michael, when I was 26. Robert was over the moon. He'd always wanted to be a father, wanted to do it better than his own father had done. Robert's dad had been distant, cold, more interested in his work than his family. Robert swore he'd never be like that, and for a long time, he wasn't. He was there for every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. He taught Michael how to ride a bike, how to throw a baseball, how to treat people with respect. Susan came 3 years later, our little girl. She was fierce from the moment she was born, came out screaming like she was angry at the world for making her wait so long. Robert adored her. He'd spend hours reading to her, playing tea party with stuffed animals, letting her paint his nails bright pink. He was so proud when she decided to go to law school, so sure that she was going to change the world. Robert worked as an engineer for the same company for 30 years. The pay was decent, but not extravagant. I stayed home with the kids until they were both in high school, then worked part-time at the library. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood. We took one family vacation a year, usually to a state park or a beach town, a few hours away. We didn't have fancy cars or designer clothes or expensive hobbies, but we had each other. And for a long time, that felt like enough. Looking back now, I can see the signs. I can see the moments where Michael started to change, where something dark crept into him that wasn't there before. Or maybe it was always there and I just didn't want to see it. He was about 16 when I first noticed he had trouble telling the truth. Small lies at first, saying he'd been at the library when he'd really been at a friend's house, claiming he'd gotten a B on a test when he'd actually failed. Robert and I talked to him about it, but he always had an excuse, always made it seem like we were overreacting. Then there was the incident when he was 19, home from college for the summer. He'd asked to borrow money, said he needed it for textbooks. We gave him $800, A week later, we found out he'd spent it all at a casino 2 hours away. When we confronted him, he said he'd been trying to win money to pay us back with interest, that he'd had a system that was supposed to work. He seemed genuinely remorseful, so we forgave him. We always forgave him. Susan was different. She was ambitious, driven, sometimes to the point where it worried me. She'd stay up until 3 in the morning studying, push herself until she was exhausted and sick. In high school, she had a friend who got better grades than her, and I watched Susan systematically sabotage that friendship. She spread rumors, turned other kids against her, did everything she could to knock this girl down. When I asked her about it, she said she was just being competitive, that the real world was cutthroat, and she was preparing herself for it. Robert and I told ourselves that all kids go through phases, that they'd grow out of it, that we'd raise them with good values, and those values would eventually win out. We were wrong. Michael never did well in any career. He bounced from job to job, always getting fired or quitting right before he was about to be fired. He blamed his bosses, his coworkers, the economy, anything but himself. He married Jennifer when he was 28, and at first we thought she'd be a good influence on him. She seemed steady, responsible, grounded, but over the years, we watched her become more and more stressed, more worn down. Michael's failures were taking a toll on their marriage. Susan became a lawyer like she'd always planned. She got a job at a big downtown firm and threw herself into her work. She barely called us, barely visited. When she did come around, she seemed distracted, always checking her phone, always thinking about work. She never married, never even had a serious relationship that we knew of. Robert worried about her. He said she was too focused on success, that she was missing out on the things that really mattered. But every time he tried to talk to her about it, she'd get defensive and angry. Still, they were our children. We loved them. We wanted to support them. So when Michael asked for money over the years, we gave it to him. Not huge amounts, but enough to help with a car payment here, a medical bill there. When Susan needed us to co-sign on her first apartment, we did it without hesitation. That's what parents do. You help your kid. But 6 months ago, everything changed. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember it was a Tuesday, because that was the day I went to my book club, and I had to cancel because of what happened. Robert woke up around 6:30, which was his normal time. He'd been retired for 3 years by then, but he still kept to his old schedule. He liked the quiet of the early morning, liked to sit at the kitchen table with his coffee and the newspaper, even though I kept telling him everything was online now. I was still in bed when I heard him groan. It was a sound I'd never heard him make before, a deep, painful sound that made my blood run cold. I jumped out of bed and ran to the kitchen. Robert was sitting at the table, his face pale, one hand pressed to his chest. "Robert, what's wrong?" "I don't know," he said, and his voice was tight with pain. "It feels like someone's sitting on my chest, like I can't breathe right." I immediately reached for the phone to call 911, but he stopped me. "No, don't. I'm sure it's nothing, probably just heartburn. You know how that leftover pizza gets me sometimes." "Robert, this isn't heartburn. We need to call Margaret, please. Just give me a few minutes. If it doesn't get better, then we'll call someone." I didn't want to wait, but Robert could be stubborn when he wanted to be. So I sat next to him, holding his hand, watching him carefully. After about 10 minutes, he said the pain was starting to ease up. After 20 minutes, he said he felt almost normal again. "See?" he said, trying to smile. "Nothing to worry about." But I was worried, very worried. As soon as he went to take a shower, I called Michael. Michael always picked up for me, no matter what time it was. Within 30 seconds he answered. "Mom, what's wrong? Is everything okay?" I told him about Robert's chest pain, about how scared I'd been. Michael's response was immediate. "I'm coming over right now. Don't let Dad do anything strenuous. And Mom, this is serious. Chest pain is nothing to mess around with. I have a friend, Dr. Harrison, who's one of the best cardiologists in the state. Let me call him and see if I can get Dad an appointment today." "Today? Michael, I'm sure he's busy. Mom, Dad's health is more important than anyone's schedule. Let me make some calls." He showed up at our house 20 minutes later. I remember thinking it was strange how quickly he arrived. We lived about 30 minutes from his house, but there he was, barely enough time for him to have gotten dressed and driven over. But I was too focused on Robert to really think about it. Michael went straight to his father. Robert was sitting in his recliner in the living room, looking much better than he had earlier, but still not quite himself. Dad, Mom told me what happened. You need to get this checked out. Michael, I'm fine. It was just a little indigestion. Dad, you're 63 years. You don't mess around with chest pain at 63. Please, let me call my friend Dr. Harrison. He owes me a favor. I can get you in today. Robert looked at me. I nodded. He sighed and agreed. Michael pulled out his phone and stepped into the kitchen. I could hear him talking in a low voice, but I couldn't make out the words. He came back a few minutes later with a big smile on his face. Good news. Dr. Harrison can see you at 3 o'clock today. He's squeezing you in as a personal favor to me. At the time, I thought we were lucky. I thought we had a son who cared enough to pull strings for his father. Now I know it wasn't luck. It was planning. It was the beginning of their trap. We went to the clinic that afternoon. It was in a medical building downtown that I'd never been to before. The lobby was impressive. All marble floors and modern art and expensive furniture. The kind of place that made you feel like you were getting premium care. Dr. Harrison's office was on the 4th floor. His waiting room was just as impressive as the lobby. Leather chairs, soft lighting, classical music playing. We only waited about 5 minutes before a nurse called Robert's name. Dr. Harrison was a tall man in his 50s, with perfectly styled silver hair and a very serious expression. He shook Robert's hand, then mine, then Michael's. Michael, good to see you again, he said. They seemed very familiar with each other, like old friends. And Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, thank you for coming in. Michael told me about your episode this morning. Let's take a look at what's going on. He asked Robert a series of questions. Had he ever had chest pain before? Any history of heart disease in the family? Did he smoke, drink, exercise regularly? Robert answered everything honestly. No previous chest pain. His father had died of a heart attack at 72, but other than that, no real family history. He'd quit smoking 30 years ago. He had a glass of wine maybe once a week. He walked every day, about 2 miles. Good, Dr. Harrison said, typing notes into his computer. Now I'd like to run some tests, just to be safe. An EKG, some blood work, maybe a stress test, and some imaging. Michael, I assume you'll be covering the costs. Whatever it takes, Michael said, immediately. My father's health is worth everything. The tests took about 3 hours. Robert was taken from one room to another, hooked up to machines, given different examinations. I sat in the waiting room, with Michael trying not to panic. Michael kept reassuring me that everything would be fine, that we were being proactive, that this was the smart thing to do. Finally, Dr. Harrison called us into his office. The 3 of us sat across from his large mahogany desk, while he pulled up images on his computer screen. Mr. Patterson, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Your test results are concerning, very concerning. He clicked through several images that meant nothing to me but apparently meant everything to him. He pointed at dark spots and light spots and lines that looked completely normal to my untrained eye. You have severe blockages in multiple arteries. Your ejection fraction, which measures how well your heart is pumping blood, is dangerously low. Your blood work shows elevated levels of certain enzymes that indicate your heart is under extreme stress. Mr. Patterson, I'm honestly surprised you're still walking around. You could have a massive, fatal heart attack at any moment. I started crying immediately. I couldn't help it. Robert squeezed my hand so hard I thought he might break it. There has to be something we can do, I managed to say through my tears. Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. There is, but it's going to require very aggressive treatment. We're talking about a very specific medication regimen, multiple drugs that will need to be taken at precise times every single day. No deviation, no missed doses. These medications will have side effects: fatigue, dizziness, confusion, tremors, but they're necessary to keep you alive until we can determine if you're a candidate for surgery. Surgery. Robert's voice was barely above a whisper. Possibly. We'd need to monitor you closely for several months first. You'll need to come in twice a week for checkups and blood work. You'll need to make significant lifestyle changes. Low sodium diet, no stress, plenty of rest. This is serious, Mr. Patterson. This is life or death. Michael jumped in before Robert could even process what he was hearing. We'll do whatever it takes, whatever medications, whatever appointments, whatever costs. I'll make sure Dad follows the treatment plan, exactly. Dr. Harrison nodded approvingly. Good. Family support is crucial in cases like this, Mrs. Patterson. Your job is to keep him calm and rested. Stress is one of the biggest risk factors for heart attack, so we need to minimize that as much as possible. He spent the next 20 minutes going over the treatment plan in detail. He wrote out prescriptions for 5 different medications: pills for blood pressure, blood thinners, something for cholesterol, something for heart rhythm, and another one whose purpose I couldn't even remember because my brain was spinning with fear and information overload. We left that office in a complete daze. Robert didn't say a word in the elevator going down. He didn't say a word as we walked through the parking garage. He just held my hand and stared straight ahead, like he was trying to process the fact that he might die at any moment. Michael drove us home, because neither of us was in any condition to drive. On the way, he stopped at a pharmacy in the same medical building where Dr. Harrison's office was located. I'll run in and get the prescriptions filled, he said. You two just wait here. He was gone for about 20 minutes. When he came back, he had a large white pharmacy bag full of pill bottles. He also had something else, a plastic pill organizer divided into days of the week and times of day. The pharmacist suggested this, he said. It'll help keep track of all the medications and make sure Dad doesn't miss any doses. We got home around 6:30. Michael insisted on staying for dinner. He said he wanted to help us get organized with the new medication routine, so we ordered Chinese food. And while we ate, Michael carefully filled the pill organizer with all of Robert's medications. Okay, Dad. Blue pill and white pill with breakfast. Green pill and yellow pill with lunch. Red pill and white pill with dinner. And then 2 white pills before bed. That's every single day. No exceptions. And you need to come back to Dr. Harrison's office this Friday for your first follow-up. Michael, I can remember my own medications, Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. I know, Dad, but there are a lot of them, and Dr. Harrison said it's crucial that you don't miss any doses. So let's just use the organizer to be safe, okay? That night, Robert took his first doses of medication. The 2 white pills before bed. Within 30 minutes, he said he felt strange. Dizzy, he said, sitting on the edge of our bed. Really dizzy. And my hands are shaking. I looked at the information sheets that had come with the medications. Sure enough, dizziness and tremors were listed as common side effects for multiple drugs. It's normal, I told him, echoing what the pharmacist had said. Your body just needs time to adjust. Robert nodded, but he didn't look convinced. He lay down and fell asleep within minutes. That was strange too. Robert usually took at least an hour to fall asleep. He'd read or listened to podcasts or just think about things. But that night, he was out almost instantly. The next morning, Wednesday, was worse. Robert could barely get out of bed. He was exhausted, disoriented, and when he tried to stand up, he swayed like he might fall over. I had to help him to the bathroom. This doesn't feel right, he said. I shouldn't feel this bad from 1 dose of medication. You took several doses, I reminded him. 2 last night, and you need to take the breakfast ones now. Maybe once you eat something, you'll feel better. I gave him the blue pill and white pill with a glass of water and a piece of toast. He took them reluctantly. Within an hour, he was back in bed, sleeping again. I called Michael, panicking. He came over immediately. Again, I noticed how fast he arrived, but again I was too worried about Robert to really think about it. Michael went upstairs and checked on his father. He came back down with a calm expression. Mom, I talked to Dr. Harrison. He said this is completely normal. The medications are very strong, and Dad's body needs time to adjust. It should get better in a few days. But what if it doesn't? What if something's wrong? Then we'll take him back to Dr. Harrison. But for now, we just need to be patient and make sure he takes his medications exactly as prescribed. Missing doses could be really dangerous. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that this was all normal, that Robert would adjust and start feeling better. But over the next few days, Robert only got worse. By Friday, when we had our first follow-up appointment with Dr. Harrison, Robert could barely stay awake long enough to get dressed. I had to help him into the car. Michael drove us to the appointment. At the clinic, nurses took Robert's blood pressure, his temperature, drew more blood for testing. Then Dr. Harrison examined him. "How are you feeling, Mr. Patterson?" "Terrible," Robert said honestly. "I've never felt this bad in my life. I can't stay awake. I can't think straight. I can barely walk without getting dizzy." I expected Dr. Harrison to be concerned. I expected him to adjust the medications, or at least acknowledge that something wasn't right. But instead, he smiled. "That's actually a good sign." "A good sign?" I repeated, incredulous. "Yes, it means the medications are working. Your body is responding to the treatment. These side effects are unfortunate, but they're better than a heart attack, wouldn't you say?" "But he can barely function," I protested. Dr. Harrison's expression became stern. "Mrs. Patterson, I understand this is difficult to watch, but your husband was on the verge of complete heart failure. These medications are keeping him alive. The side effects will lessen over time, as his body adjusts. But right now, staying on this regimen is non-negotiable. If he stops taking these medications, he will die. Do you understand?" What could I say to that? Of course I understood. Of course I wanted Robert alive, no matter what the side effects were. Over the next several weeks, our lives fell into a terrible routine. Robert took his medications 4 times a day, morning, noon, evening, and before bed. And after each dose, he became more and more like a ghost of himself. He slept 18 hours a day. When he was awake, he was confused. He'd forget what day it was. He'd forget conversations we'd just had. Sometimes he didn't seem to recognize where he was. Michael came over every Monday and Thursday to refill the pill organizer and drive Robert to his twice-weekly appointments with Dr. Harrison. I wasn't allowed to go to the appointments anymore. Michael said it was too stressful for me, that I needed to stay home and rest. He said he could handle the medical stuff. Susan started visiting every weekend. This surprised me because Susan was usually so busy with work, but suddenly she had time to come spend hours at our house, sitting with her father, even when he was too sedated to really respond to her. She'd also ask me questions. Lots of questions. "Mom, I've been thinking about your finances. If something happened to Dad, would you be okay? Do you know where all the important documents are? Do you have access to all the bank accounts?" I told her everything was organized. Our important documents were in the safe in our bedroom closet. The combination was Robert's birthday, November 15th. Susan asked, "Just so I know where everything is, in case you ever need help." I showed her the safe. Inside were our life insurance policies, our will, the deed to the house, bank statements, investment account information. Everything. Robert had a $500,000 life insurance policy from his former employer. We'd also bought a second policy years ago for $200,000. The house was worth about $400,000. We had roughly $180,000 in savings and investment, and Robert's pension would provide me with a survivor benefit of about $3,000 a month if he died before me. Susan took pictures of everything on her phone. "Just for reference," she said, "in case you ever need help sorting through all this." At the time, I thought she was being thoughtful. Now I know she was calculating, counting up how much she and Michael would get once Robert was dead. About 3 months into this nightmare, Michael brought up the idea of updating our will. "Mom, Dad, your will is really old. It was written, 20 years ago? A lot has changed since then. You should really update it. Susan's a lawyer. She could help you. She'd do it for free." Robert was too out of it to participate in any meaningful way. But I thought it made sense. Our will was old. It didn't account for our grandchildren. It didn't reflect our current financial situation. And Susan was a lawyer, so we'd save money by having her help us. A week later, Susan came over with draft documents. She sat with me at the kitchen table and went through everything. "Okay, Mom, this is pretty straightforward. You and Dad split everything 50-50 between Michael and me. That's standard for parents with 2 children. But I've also added a trust provision." "A trust provision?" "Yes, so if one of you dies, The surviving spouse's inheritance goes into a trust managed by Michael and me. That way, you don't have to worry about managing investments or finances. We'll take care of all that for you. You'll still have full access to the money, of course. We'll just handle the technical stuff. It sounded reasonable. I was 61 years old. What did I know about managing investments? Michael worked in pharmaceutical sales, and Susan was a lawyer. They understood this stuff better than I did. There's just one thing, Susan continued. For the trust to work properly, we need to make some changes to how your accounts are structured. I'll need you to sign these forms to add Michael and me as joint account holders on your savings and investment accounts. That way, if something happens to Dad, we can manage everything smoothly without having to go through probate. Again, it sounded reasonable. I signed the form. I also signed the new will. Susan had brought a notary with her, one of her colleagues from the law firm. Everything was made legal and official. 2 weeks later, I noticed something odd. I went to check our savings account balance online, and the password had been changed. When I called the bank, they said the account had been restructured, and I'd need to call one of the joint account holders to get the new login information. When I asked Susan about it, she said it was just part of the new account structure. She gave me the new password and told me not to worry about it. I didn't think much of it at the time. Around the 4-month mark, Robert had what I'd call a moment of clarity. We were lying in bed late at night. He'd been asleep for most of the evening, but suddenly his eyes opened, and they were clear. Really, truly clear, in a way they hadn't been in months. "Margaret," he whispered urgently, grabbing my hand. "I need to tell you something." "What is it? Are you in pain?" "No. Listen to me. Something's very wrong. I don't feel sick. I feel drugged. These medications, I think they're making me worse, not better." "Robert, you're just confused from the medications themselves." "No, I'm not confused. Not right now. Margaret, when Michael's not watching, when I skip doses, I feel better, clearer, stronger. But then he shows up and makes sure I take them, and within an hour I can't think straight again. What if they're poisoning me?" My heart stopped. "Robert, that's insane." Michael wouldn't think about it. Dr. Harrison's friend of Michael's. We'd never heard of him before. Michael arranged everything. He's at our house constantly, making sure I take every single pill. And have you noticed how quickly he shows up? How he always seems to know when to come over? I wanted to tell him he was being paranoid, but I couldn't, because I'd noticed the same things. "And Susan," Robert continued, "all those questions about our finances, taking pictures of everything in the safe, getting us to change our will. Margaret, what if..." The bedroom door opened. Michael walked in with a big smile. "Hey Dad, how are you feeling? I just wanted to check on you before I headed home." We'd given Michael a key to the house months ago, so he could check on us whenever he wanted. At the time it had seemed like a good idea. Now, with Robert's words fresh in my mind, it felt sinister. "I'm fine," Robert said. But his voice had changed. He sounded guarded, scared, even. Michael walked over to the nightstand where the pill organizer sat. "Oh, I see you haven't taken your evening medications yet." "Mom, I thought you were going to give them to Dad before bed." I looked at the clock. It was 10:30 p.m. I was just about to. "Here, let me help." Michael poured a glass of water from the pitcher on the nightstand. He took out the 2 white pills from the evening slot of the organizer. He walked over to Robert and stood there, waiting. Robert looked at me, then at Michael. Then he took the pills and swallowed them. Michael watched until he was sure Robert had swallowed. "Good, very good. We can't miss any doses, Dad. Dr. Harrison was very clear about that. Missing even one dose could trigger a heart attack." He stayed for another 10 minutes, chatting about nothing in particular, but his eyes never left Robert. It was like he was studying him, watching for something. After Michael left, I waited to see what would happen. Within 20 minutes, Robert's eyes started to flutter. Within 30 minutes, he was unconscious. Not sleeping peacefully, but knocked out like he'd been drugged, because he had been drugged. That's when I knew. Robert was right. Our son was poisoning him. And our daughter was helping. But what could I do? If I confronted them, they'd deny it. If I stopped giving Robert the medications, Michael would know. And then what? Would they escalate? Would they do something more direct? I spent the next several weeks in a state of constant fear and confusion. I wanted to protect Robert, but I didn't know how. I wanted to go to the police, but with what evidence? Robert had been diagnosed by a licensed doctor. He was on prescribed medications. On paper, everything looked legit. Michael and Susan continued their routine: visits, questions, constant monitoring. They were always there, always watching, always making sure Robert took his pills. Then, about 5 months into this hell, Susan brought up updating our will again. Mom, I've been thinking. The will we drafted doesn't actually reflect current estate planning best practices. I think we should revise it. Susan, we just updated it a few months ago. I know, but I've been doing more research. There are better ways to structure things that will save a lot on estate taxes. Plus, I want to make sure you're really protected if something happens to Dad. She brought new documents the next week, more papers to sign, more forms about the trust, about the account structures, about how everything would be divided and managed. I signed them because I didn't know what else to do, because I was exhausted and scared, and I just wanted someone to take care of the complicated stuff. By the 6th month, Robert was barely conscious most of the time. He'd wake up for maybe an hour a day. The rest of the time he was either sleeping or in a state that was something less than sleep, but more than unconsciousness. Dr. Harrison said it was the progression of his heart disease. He said the medications could only do so much. Michael started talking about hospice care. Mom, I don't think Dad has much time left. We need to be realistic. Maybe a few months, maybe less. We should start thinking about hospice, about making sure he's comfortable in his final days. I refused to think about it. I couldn't accept that I was losing my husband. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. I woke up that morning around 6:30. Something felt wrong. The air felt different. The light coming through the curtains seemed dimmer than usual. I looked over at Robert. He was lying on his back, completely still. Too still. I reached over and touched his arm. His skin was cold. Gray. Robert? No response. Robert. I shook him. Nothing. I put my ear to his chest. No heartbeat. No breath. I screamed. I shook him harder. I tried to remember CPR. Tried to do something, anything to bring him back. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand to call 911. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely unlock it, but before I could dial, I heard the front door open downstairs. Mom? Dad? I'm here, Michael's voice. He came running up the stairs and burst into the bedroom. What's wrong? I heard you scream. Robert's not breathing. He's not. Michael, call 911, please. Michael rushed to the bed. He checked Robert's pulse, put his ear to his chest, looked at his eyes. Then he looked at me with the saddest expression I'd ever seen on his face. Mom, he's gone. Dad, he's dead. No, no. Call 911. They can save him. They can. Mom. Michael grabbed my shoulders. He's already gone. There's nothing they can do. His heart finally gave out, just like Dr. Harrison said it would. I collapsed. I don't remember much of the next few hours. I remember Michael making phone calls. I remember him pulling me away from Robert's body. I remember sitting on the floor of our bedroom crying so hard I couldn't breathe. The paramedics came. They confirmed what Michael had said. Time of death approximately 6:47 a.m. Harrison came to the house. He examined Robert's body, signed documents, said something about how an autopsy wasn't necessary, since Robert had been under consistent medical care for a terminal condition. A funeral home came and took Robert's body away. Michael had already called them. He'd already made arrangements. Mom, I know this is overwhelming. Let me handle everything. You just rest. He gave me a pill. I don't even know what it was. I took it because I couldn't think, couldn't process what was happening. The next few days are a blur. Susan was at the house constantly. People came and went. Food appeared. Phone calls were made. Decisions were made. I remember Michael talking about funeral arrangements. I remember him saying something about cremation, then changing it to burial. Dad always wanted to be buried, remember, Mom? He wanted a traditional funeral. He wanted to be next to his parents. Had Robert said that? I couldn't remember. Everything was fog and grief. and exhaustion. The funeral was scheduled for Friday, 5 days after Robert's death. Michael picked out the casket. Susan ordered the flowers. They paid for everything. Don't worry about the cost, Mom. We want to give Dad the best. On Wednesday, 2 days before the funeral, I wanted to see Robert one last time. I went to the funeral home and asked if I could have a private viewing. The funeral director looked uncomfortable. Miss Patterson, I'm afraid that's not possible. The casket will remain closed, but I need to say goodbye. I need to see him. I understand, truly, but given the circumstances, it's just better to remember him as he was. Trust me on this. I started to argue, but Michael appeared. He'd driven me to the funeral home. He'd been waiting in the lobby. Mom, please, listen to Mr. Reynolds. He's the professional here. You don't want to see Dad like that. Trust me, remember him healthy and happy. I wanted to insist. I wanted to demand to see my husband, but I was so broken. I just nodded and let Michael lead me back to the car. Friday came, the day of the funeral. It was cold and gray, the kind of day where it feels like the world is mourning with you. I put on my black dress, the one I'd worn to Robert's father's funeral 10 years ago. I couldn't eat breakfast. I couldn't do anything but sit and stare at the wall. Michael picked me up at noon. The service was at 1, at the funeral home. Then we'd go to the cemetery at 2:30. About 30 people came to the service. Some of Robert's old colleagues from the engineering firm. A few of our neighbors. My younger sister Linda, who'd driven in from Chicago. Some cousins we hadn't seen in years. The casket sat at the front of the room, closed, covered in white roses and lilies. It looked beautiful and horrible at the same time. A priest I'd never met gave a generic speech about Robert's life. He talked about Robert's work ethic, his devotion to his family, his kindness, but it all felt empty because this priest had never known Robert. He was reading from a script that could have been about anyone. Then Susan stood up to give a eulogy. She walked to the front of the room, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. When she spoke, her voice was trembling. My father was the best man I've ever known. He taught me everything. He taught me to work hard, to never give up, to always strive for excellence. He was there for every important moment of my life. When I graduated from law school, he was in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. When I got my first big case, he took me out to celebrate. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She paused, crying, or pretending to cry. I couldn't tell anymore. I'm going to miss him every single day for the rest of my life. But I know he'd want me to be strong. He'd want me to keep pushing forward, and that's what I'm going to do for him. She sat back down next to me and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back automatically, but I felt nothing. I was numb. Michael didn't give a speech. He just sat on my other side, holding my other hand, occasionally handing me tissues. Then it was time to go to the cemetery. We drove in a long line of cars to Green Hills Memorial Park. It's where Robert's parents are buried. We'd bought plots there years ago, right next to his mother and father. Robert had liked the idea of being close to them, even in death. The sky was getting darker as we arrived. The wind was picking up. I could smell rain in the air. We gathered around the grave. It had already been dug, a dark rectangular hole in the earth. The casket sat on a lowering device, ready to be placed into the ground. The same priest from the funeral home was there. He wasn't anyone we knew. Michael had arranged for him. We are gathered here today, the priest began, his voice carrying across the cemetery, to commit the body of Robert James Patterson to the earth. From dust we came, and to dust we shall return. Though we grieve his passing, we take comfort in knowing that Robert is now at peace, free from pain and suffering, reunited with loved ones who went before him. I stared at the casket. My husband was in there, the man I'd loved for 38 years, the man who'd held my hand through every crisis, the man who'd made me laugh until I cried, the man who knew me better than I knew myself. Gone, forever gone. The priest continued his prayer. Let us pray. Almighty God, we entrust our brother Robert to your mercy. You loved him greatly in this life. Now that he is freed from all its cares, give him happiness and peace forever. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen, everyone murmured. That's when I felt it, a vibration in my coat pocket. My phone. I almost ignored it. Who would be texting me at my husband's funeral? But something made me pull it out. Maybe instinct. Maybe fate. Maybe Robert himself, reaching out from wherever he was. I looked at the screen. One new message from an unknown number. I opened it. The words on the screen made my heart stop. I'm not in the coffin. I'm alive. Don't trust the children. They're watching you. I read it again and again. My hands started shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I looked up from the screen, trying to process what I was seeing, trying to understand if this was real or if I'd finally lost my mom. Michael was staring directly at me. His eyes were locked on mine, and he was smiling. Not the sad smile of a grieving son, not the supportive smile of someone comforting their mother. This was something else entirely, something that made my blood freeze in my veins. It was the smile of someone who knows a secret, the smile of someone who's winning a game I didn't even know we were playing, the smile of a predator watching its prey realize it's trapped. Susan noticed me looking at my phone. Her eyes narrowed. She took a step closer. "Mom," she said loudly, her voice cutting through the priest's prayer. Everyone turned to look at me. "Are you okay? You look pale." I had to say something. I had to act normal. "I'm fine," I managed, my voice shaking. Just a spam text. These telemarketers have no respect." I shoved the phone back into my pocket with trembling hands and tried to focus on the funeral. But my mind was racing so fast, I thought my head might explode. If that message was real, if Robert was alive, then who was in that casket? The priest finished his prayer. The casket was lowered into the ground slowly, mechanically. The sound of the machinery seemed deafening in the quiet cemetery. Once the casket was in the grave, people started coming forward to toss handfuls of dirt onto it. I heard each handful hit the wood with a hollow thud, a hollow thud. That sound registered somewhere in my brain. Wood shouldn't sound hollow when you throw dirt on it. Not if there's a body inside. Michael handed me a shovel. "Mom, do you wanna?" I took the shovel with numb hands. I scooped up some earth and threw it into the grave. It landed on the casket with that same hollow sound. Empty. The casket was empty. Or it wasn't Robert inside. The message was real. Robert was alive. And my children had just buried an empty casket or a fake body while they smiled and cried crocodile tears. The burial ended. People started drifting away from the grave. Michael kept his hand on my elbow, guiding me back toward the cars. "Let's get you home, Mom. You've had a long day." Back at the house, there was a gathering. Susan had arranged for it. Catered food, coffee, wine. People came inside and gave their condolences. They told stories about Robert. They said things like, "He's in a better place, and at least he's not suffering anymore." I smiled and nodded and thanked them. But all I could think about was that message. After what felt like hours, people finally started leaving. By 7 p.m. it was just Michael, Susan, and me. "Mom, why don't you go rest?" Michael suggested, his voice dripping with fake concern. "We'll clean all this up. I can help." "No, Mom. You've been through enough today. Please, go lie down." I was exhausted, and I needed to be alone to think. So I agreed. I went upstairs to my empty bedroom. I lay down on the bed, but I didn't sleep. I pulled out my phone and looked at the message again. It was still there. I hadn't imagined it. I tried to reply, "Robert, is this really you? Where are you? What's happening?" The message bounced back immediately. "Number not in service." I tried calling the number. Same thing. "The number you have dialed is not in service." I heard Michael and Susan downstairs, talking in low voices. I got up and crept to the top of the stairs, trying to listen. "Did you see her face when she got that text?" Susan's voice. "I know. We need to find out what it said. If someone's trying to mess with the plan. Could it have been from him? Could he have somehow? No, impossible. He's 6 feet underground. This has to be someone else. Maybe one of his old friends playing a sick joke. What if it's not a joke? What if someone knows? Nobody knows. Nobody can know." The death certificate is signed. The body is buried. Everything's legal. In 3 days, the will goes into effect, and we get control of the trust. All we have to do is keep Mom calm and compliant for 3 more days. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it. What about the house? Susan asked. Once we have control of the trust, we convince Mom to sell it. Tell her it's too big, too many memories. She moves into a little apartment somewhere, and we handle the sale. The house is worth $400,000, plus the life insurance, $750,000 total, plus the investments, plus we'll manage her pension income. We're talking about controlling over $1.5 million in assets, and she has no idea? None. She thinks we're the devoted children taking care of their grieving mother. She'll do whatever we tell her to do. Split 50-50? Of course. We're partners in this. I heard footsteps. They were coming upstairs. I ran back to the bedroom, as quietly as I could, and threw myself onto the bed, pretending to be asleep. The door opened slowly. I kept my eyes closed and tried to breathe evenly. She's out cold, Michael whispered. Probably the sedative I gave her earlier. Good. Should we check her phone? I felt them approach the bed. I felt Susan's hand reaching toward my coat, which was draped over the chair. But I'd already moved my phone. It was under my pillow. It's not in her coat, Susan said. Check her purse. I heard them rummaging through my purse on the dresser. Not here either. Maybe she took it to bed with her. Leave it. We'll check tomorrow when she's at that grief counselor appointment I scheduled for her. They left, closing the door softly behind them. I waited until I heard them go back downstairs. Then I slowly opened my eyes and reached for my phone. If Robert was alive, where was he? And how could I find him? Then I remembered something. About 6 months ago, before all this started, Robert had mentioned wanting to update our safe deposit box at the bank. He said he was going to put some important documents there. I'd completely forgotten about it, until now. Was that where he was? Was he in hiding? I had to find out, but I couldn't leave now. If Michael and Susan saw me leave, they'd know something was wrong. They'd stop me. I looked at the clock. 9:30 p.m. I'd wait. I'd pretend to sleep until they left, and then I'd go. I lay in bed, my heart racing, listening to my children move around downstairs. They talked in low voices that I couldn't quite make out. They laughed at something. They were celebrating the successful murder of their father. Finally, around 11 p.m., I heard them leave. 2 car engines starting, pulling out of the driveway. I waited another 20 minutes to make sure they weren't coming back. Then I got up, grabbed my purse, my phone, my car keys, and quietly left the house. The drive downtown took 25 minutes. I kept checking my rearview mirror, terrified that Michael or Susan would somehow know where I was going and follow me. The bank had a 24-hour safe deposit box access room. I parked in the garage and took the elevator up. I used my key and ID to get into the vault room. The security guard barely looked at me. I found our box, number 35. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a large manila envelope with my name on it, in Robert's handwriting. I grabbed it and sat down on the bench in the corner of the vault room. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. The first thing I pulled out was a letter, handwritten, dated 3 weeks ago, the day before Robert supposedly died. I started reading, and with every word, my world shattered and rebuilt itself into something entirely new. Margaret, if you're reading this, then you've received my message, and you've come looking for answers. I'm so sorry for everything I'm about to tell you. I'm sorry for the fear and confusion. I'm sorry for faking my death. But most of all, I'm sorry that I didn't see what our children had become until it was almost too late. I'm alive, Margaret. I'm in hiding, and our children tried to kill me. I'm not sick. I never was. My heart is perfectly fine. 6 months ago, Michael came to me with an investment opportunity. He wanted me to invest $200,000, almost all of our savings, into some pharmaceutical company that his friends supposedly had insider information about. He promised it would triple our money in 6 months. Maybe more. I said no immediately. It sounded like insider trading, which is illegal. Even if it wasn't illegal, it was far too risky. That money was our retirement security. I wasn't going to gamble it away. Michael lost his temper. He said I was ruining his life, that I'd always held him back, that I'd never believed in him. He stormed out. I thought that was the end of it. But a week later, both Michael and Susan came to see me. Together. They tag-teamed me, both of them trying to convince me to make the investment. They said if I didn't do it, they'd cut us out of their lives completely. We'd never see them again. I still said no. Our relationship with them wasn't worth more than our financial security. If they were going to blackmail us, emotionally, then maybe we needed some distance anyway. That's when everything changed. The next week, Michael took me to see Dr. Harrison. You were there. You remember, that's when I was supposedly diagnosed with severe heart disease. But Margaret, I wasn't sick, I felt fine. But Dr. Harrison showed me all those tests and scans, and Michael was so convincing and concerned. I started to doubt myself. What if I really was sick and just couldn't feel it yet? They put me on all those medications. Within days, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse, much worse. I did some research on Dr. Harrison. Margaret, he had his medical license suspended 5 years ago for insurance fraud. He got it reinstated, but he's been in trouble several times since then. He's desperate for money, willing to bend rules and ethics. I realized what was happening. Michael had paid Dr. Harrison to give me a false diagnosis. The medications weren't treating a heart condition. They were creating one. They were slowly poisoning me. I confronted Michael. He said I was confused from my illness, that I wasn't thinking clearly, that I needed to trust the treatment. But I was thinking clearly. I started doing more research. I found out that Michael is in massive gambling debt, over $300,000. He owes money to some very dangerous people. I found out that Susan is about to be disbarred. She's been embezzling money from her law firm's client trust accounts. They're building a case against her right now. They need money desperately, and we're their only option. So they hatched a plan. Make me sick, make you dependent on them, get control of our assets, and then I'd either die from the poison, or they'd find a way to finish the job more direct. I've been pretending to take the medications for the last few weeks, hiding them, spitting them out, when no one was looking. That's why I started getting clearer. Started figuring things out, but I couldn't keep it up. They were watching me too closely, and I knew they'd escalate soon. So I came up with a plan of my own. I'm going to fake my death. I have a contact at the funeral home. Bill Reynolds and I went to high school together. For $50,000 from my own secret savings account that you didn't know about. He's going to help me stage everything. The death certificate will be signed by Dr. Harrison, because he's part of their scheme, but the body in the casket won't be mine. Bill has access to medical cadavers from the anatomy lab, where he used to work. We're going to use one that's roughly my size and age. It'll be in the closed casket. No one will know. I'll go into hiding. I'll gather evidence. I'll build an airtight case against Michael, Susan, and Dr. Harrison. When I have everything I need, I'll go to the police and have them arrested. I know this sounds insane. I know you probably think I've lost my mind. But Margaret, I promise you, this is the only way. If I just went to the police now, it would be my word against a licensed doctor's. They'd think I was paranoid from my heart condition. Michael and Susan would have time to cover their tracks. This way, they'll incriminate themselves. They'll think they've won. They'll get sloppy, and I'll catch them. Don't trust them. Don't sign anything. Don't let them control your money. And whatever you do, don't take any pills or food they give you. Once I'm dead, you become their only obstacle. I'll contact you when it's safe. Until then, act normal. Grieve. Give me time. I love you more than anything in this world. I'm fighting to come back to you. Forever yours, Robert. I had to read the letter 3 times before I could fully process it. Robert was alive. He'd faked his death to catch our children trying to murder him. Our children were murderers. I cried, not tears of grief this time, but tears of rage and relief and terror, all mixed together. The envelope contained more documents, bank statements, showing Michael's gambling debts, hundreds of thousands of dollars owed to various casinos, and what looked like loan sharks, legal documents about the investigation into Susan's embezzlement, dates, amounts, evidence, medical records, showing that Robert's heart was actually in excellent condition, background checks on Dr. Harrison, showing his suspended license, and multiple complaints filed against him. There was also a burner phone at the bottom of the envelope, with one number programmed into it. No name, just a number. With shaking hands, I dialed it. It rang twice. Margaret? Robert's voice. Alive. Real. My husband. I started sobbing so hard I couldn't speak. Margaret, honey. Breathe. I know this is overwhelming. I know this seems impossible, but I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you somewhere safe? I'm at the bank, I managed to say through my tears, in the safe deposit room. Good, that's good. Stay there, I need to explain everything. For the next 2 hours, we talked. Robert told me everything in detail, how he'd been documenting every pill Michael gave him, saving them instead of taking them, how he'd recorded conversations with Dr. Harrison, where the doctor slipped up and revealed he was being paid to keep Robert sedated, how Michael and Susan had forged the new will 6 weeks ago, had it notarized by Susan's friend, who didn't actually check anything, how they'd been planning to drain our accounts slowly, keeping me alive, but controlled until there was nothing left. That morning, the morning I supposedly died, Robert explained, they put something in your orange juice at breakfast, something to make you sleep deeply. That's why you didn't wake up until 6:30. Usually you're up by 6. I remember I felt really groggy that morning. They wanted you unconscious, so you wouldn't see or hear anything. Michael came to the house early, around 5 a.m. He was planning to give me a massive overdose of the medications, enough to actually kill me. He thought you'd wake up and find me dead, call 911, and everything would look like my heart finally gave out. But you weren't there. No, I'd left at 4 a.m. Bill from the funeral home met me 2 blocks away. We'd already placed the cadaver in the bed, positioned just right. When Michael came in to kill me, he killed a body that was already dead. When you woke up, you found what you thought was my body, and everyone assumed it was you. Exactly, Michael assumed his plan worked. The paramedics assumed. Dr. Harrison assumed. Even Bill at the funeral home played along perfectly, acting like he'd received my actual body. The closed casket. Michael insisted on it, because he didn't want anyone looking too closely. He thought he was hiding the evidence of what he'd done to me. He didn't know there was nothing to hide, because I wasn't actually dead. And the text message you sent at the funeral? I was there. I was parked on the far side of the cemetery with binoculars. I had to see it through. I had to watch them go through with the burial to be sure they really believed I was dead. And Margaret, when Michael looked at you after you got my text, I saw his face. I saw what he really is. That's when I knew I'd made the right decision. Robert, they're planning to take everything. They were talking about it tonight. The trust, the house, controlling all the money. I know, but here's the thing. I've been working with a detective, Detective Sarah Morrison. She's with the fraud division. I've been giving her everything. The documents, the recordings, the evidence. She's been building a case. Can't they arrest Michael and Susan now? Almost. We need just a little bit more. We need them to actually try to access the money illegally. We need them to make one more move that we can prove was fraud. The will reading is Monday, right? Yeah, they want me to sign papers, giving them control of the trust. Don't sign, make an excuse, say you need your own lawyer to review it first. That will force them to either wait or do something desperate. Either way, we'll have them. Robert, I'm scared. They came to the house tonight. They were looking for my phone. They know something's wrong. I know, that's why we're moving up the timeline. Detective Morrison is going to have patrol cars drive by your house every hour tonight. If Michael or Susan show up, the police will be there within minutes. You're safe. When can I see you? When can you come home? Soon, my love, very soon. Just hang on a little bit longer. We talked until almost midnight. He told me he was staying in a motel about 2 hours away, using a fake name, paying cash for everything. He'd been living there for 3 weeks, working with the detective, gathering evidence, planning the endgame. When I finally drove home, it was almost 1 a.m. I was emotionally and physically exhausted, but also strangely energized. Robert was alive. We were going to win. We were going to stop them. The weekend was torture. Michael came by Saturday morning with coffee and pastries, playing the devoted son. Susan came Saturday afternoon, with more food, more fake concern. How are you holding up, Mom? I'm managing. I lied. The will reading is Monday. Are you ready for that? I suppose I have to be. Sunday was more of the same. They tag-teamed again, never leaving me alone for long. I couldn't call Robert. I couldn't check in with him. I just had to trust the plan. Monday came. The will reading was at 2 p.m. Michael picked me up at 1:30. Susan met us at the office of Nathan Berkowitz, Susan's lawyer friend. Nathan gave his speech about Robert's will, and the trust, about how Michael and Susan would manage everything, and I'd get a monthly allowance. When he handed me the papers to sign, I picked up the pen. I looked at the signature line. Actually, I said, setting down the pen, I'd like to have my own attorney review these documents before I sign anything. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mom, that's not necessary, Michael said, his voice tight. I think it is. This is a lot to process. I want to make sure I understand everything. Mrs. Patterson, Nathan interjected. I can assure you. I'm sure you can, but I still want my own lawyer to look at it. That's my right, isn't it? Nobody could argue with that. But Michael and Susan were furious. I could see it in their eyes. Even though they kept their expressions carefully neutral. We left the office. 15 minutes later, Michael was silent on the drive home, dangerously silent. When we pulled up to my house, he finally spoke. Mom, I'm very disappointed. I thought you trusted us. I do trust you. I just need to be careful. Careful of what? Your own children. Careful with your father's life's work. I owe him that much. Michael's jaw clenched. But don't take too long. There are time-sensitive matters that need to be addressed. He drove away without saying goodbye. I went inside and immediately called Robert on the burner phone. I did it. I didn't sign anything. But Robert, they're getting suspicious. I know, but it's okay. Detective Morrison said that was the last piece of evidence she needed. Michael and Susan's behavior today, pressuring you to sign without legal representation, combined with everything else, it's enough. They're issuing arrest warrants tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, really? By this time tomorrow, it'll all be over. But it wasn't tomorrow morning. It was that very night, around 11 p.m. I heard glass breaking downstairs. Someone was in the house. I grabbed the burner phone and dialed 911. Someone's breaking into my house. I whispered urgently. 847 Maple Drive. Please hurry. I could hear footsteps, heavy footsteps, more than one person. I locked my bedroom door and pushed the dresser in front of it. Margaret, Michael's voice, slurred and angry. He was drunk or high or something. Open this fucking door. Mom. Susan's voice, equally out of control. We know you're talking to someone. We know you're planning something. They were both there, and they were done playing nice. Just sign the goddamn papers, Mom, Michael shouted. This doesn't have to get ugly. The doorknob rattled violently. If you don't open this door right now, we're breaking it down. I heard sirens in the distance. The 911 operator was still on the line with me. Mom, officers are almost there. Stay on the line. Boom. Something heavy hit the door. The wood splintered. You ruined everything. Susan screamed. All you had to do was cooperate. Just sign the fucking papers and everything would have been fine. Boom. The dresser started to slide across the floor. The sirens were getting louder. Boom. The door broke open. Michael and Susan stood in the doorway, and I barely recognized them. Their faces were twisted with rage and desperation. You should have just signed, Michael said, stepping into the room. That's when I heard the most beautiful sound of my life. Police, everyone free. Multiple officers rushed up the stairs, guns drawn, hands up. Now, what happened next was a blur. Officers everywhere, Michael and Susan being handcuffed, screaming about injustice and misunderstanding, me being escorted out of the house, wrapped in a blanket, sitting in the back of a police car. And then another car pulled up, a familiar car. The back door opened, and Robert stepped out. He looked thinner than I remembered, tired and worn, but alive, so wonderfully alive. I ran to him. We collided in the middle of the street, holding each other so tightly I thought we might become one person. Behind us, Michael and Susan were being loaded into police cars, still screaming, "You can't do this. We didn't do anything wrong. Mom, Mom, please, tell them this is a mistake." I didn't turn around. I didn't acknowledge them. They were strangers to me now. The children I'd raised didn't exist. Maybe they never had. Detective Morrison introduced herself. She explained that they'd been monitoring Michael and Susan all evening. When they'd bought the crowbar they used to break into my house, the police had moved in. "We have more than enough to charge them," she said. "Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, forgery, elder abuse, breaking and entering." The DA is very confident in the case. The trial took 6 months. It was covered by all the local news stations. Our private tragedy became public spectacle. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings Robert had made, the fake medical records, the forged will documents, the testimony from Harrison, who took a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Michael and Susan, the cadaver from the funeral, which had been quietly exhumed and examined. Michael and Susan tried to claim they were the real victims, that Robert and I had manipulated them, that we'd faked everything to make them look bad. Nobody believed them. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Dr. Harrison got 15 years for his role in the scheme. His medical license was permanently revoked. Susan got 20 years. Her law license was revoked. The law firm she worked for filed a civil suit against her for the money she'd embezzled. Michael got 25 years. The loan sharks he owed money to turned out to be connected to organized crime. He was lucky to be in prison where they couldn't get to him. Jennifer, Michael's wife, divorced him before the trial even ended. She testified against him, said she'd had no idea what he was planning. I believe her. She seemed as shocked as everyone else. Robert and I sold our house. Too many bad memories. We moved to a small town in Montana where nobody knows our story. We bought a little cabin near a lake. We spend our days hiking, fishing, reading, and being grateful for every moment we have together. We don't have children anymore. Not really. They're alive, in prison, but they're dead to us. Sometimes people ask me how I cope with what happened. How do you survive learning that your own children tried to murder their father? How do you keep going after that kind of betrayal? The truth is, some days are harder than others. Some days I still can't believe it really happened. I have nightmares where I'm at the funeral again, where I get that text message, where I see Michael smile. I wake up in a panic, and Robert has to hold me until I remember that we're safe now. Some days I mourn the children I thought I had, because those children, the loving, devoted son and daughter I imagined, they didn't exist. They were masks, hiding something dark and greedy and cruel underneath. But I survived because Robert survived, because we fought back, because we refused to let them win. Every morning, when I wake up next to my husband, when I hear him breathing beside me, when I feel his hand reach for mine in the darkness, I remember that text message I got at the cemetery. "I'm not in the coffin. I'm alive. Don't trust the children. They're watching you." 6 words that saved both our lives. 6 words that gave us a second chance at happiness. 6 words that reminded me that sometimes the most dangerous threats come from the people you love most. We're careful now. We don't trust easily. We keep our finances private. We don't tell people where we live. We've learned that blood isn't always thicker than water, that family can be your greatest betrayers. But we've also learned that true love endures, that loyalty means something, that when you find someone who will fake their own death to protect you, you hold on to them forever. Robert jokes sometimes that he's died once, and has no intention of doing it again. I tell him he'd better not, because I don't think I could survive losing him for real. We're 63 and 61 years old. We've been given something precious, time we shouldn't have had, life that was almost stolen from us. We don't waste a single day of it, and every night before we go to sleep, Robert kisses my forehead, and says the same thing. "I'm alive, Maggie. I'm right here, and I'm never leaving you again." That's how I know I'm safe. That's how I know we've won. The funeral that wasn't really a funeral. The death that wasn't really a death. The children who weren't really children. It's all behind us now. We're alive. We're together. And that's all that matters.